I completed my Q section. Ta-da! And I did want to show you how I put sections together. I have breakfast on my shirt, and somehow I am missing a whole section's worth of fabric. Like, I had these cut out and filed, and I've been through my files and I'm not finding it. So I'm gonna set that aside for now. Maybe it'll turn up, but I wanted to start putting P together and show you my process. So as soon as I finish all of my sections, all of my pieces within a section, for legit kits, I don't typically trim my sections. When it's a little piece like this, I do not trim before I join. That's a different process. When I'm doing large pieces like this, I do trim. And I actually will sometimes remove the paper before joining. So I'll show you both ways. So I'm just gonna use the assembly guide in the pattern and follow those steps and put it together the way that it's illustrated. And when I finish my sections, I like to alphabetize them just because that's typically how they're put together. Legit kits and so I typically, you put them together in alphabetical order, or you pull them, you know, in alphabetical order. And so just by putting them in a stack alphabetical, that just kind of eliminates some searching right there. So my stack is alphabetical, I have my diagram, and I'm ready to sew. Okay, so I think you can see my sewing machine here. So the first step is PA to PB, and this is from the paper side. So you just want to make sure that when you're putting PA to PB, it's like this. You're not trying to do it like this from the fabric side. That's the view from the paper side. And so if you want, you can put them together, right sides together, kind of line up. I don't trim my dog ears though. That's totally up to you, but see how this has a little extra bit I could have trimmed off? I don't worry about that. I might use them to line everything up, but I don't actually trim them. That's just a lot of work for me. So I will line these up. Essentially what you're going for is let me pin this and then I can show you, but you want the sewing line to hit right at the valley that forms from the peaks, so, or dog ears. So this is what's called a dog ear here. It's just kind of sticking up there. And this is how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to go past when you have two opposite angles intersecting to sew together. So technically they're opposites because one's coming this way, and so when you put them together, they're going in opposite directions, and that's why you end up with the dog ear. But what you're really looking for is the sewing line here. So this sewing line should come up and intersect right at the valley that forms with that dog ear. So same thing at both ends. This sewing line should be lined up with the valley there, right there. So if you put these together and your sewing line, you know, let's say you put it together and you're like, well, I feel like right sides together means they should all meet up, and you hide that dog ear. Look at your sewing line. Your sewing line doesn't have a valley, and so when you sew, what you're really doing over here, if I line up the point, by the time you sew, you'll be sewing like a hole into your seam. See how when I sew that line, I now have some missing fabric. So you want to line up the dog ears, allow the dog ear to peek over so that when you sew, you don't have any holes in your fabric. And see how the sewing line now just lines up perfectly with the valley. So now you have a couple choices. When I'm working with large pieces like this, I will sometimes just remove the paper. especially because I don't have any like critical intersections here. Like this sewing line doesn't really hit anything. This is just a solid piece of fabric, so it's not real critical. So you can remove your paper before you pin even. And only do this if you feel comfortable. Don't do this if you don't feel comfortable doing it. Don't do something I'm telling you to do just because I told you to do it. If you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. But you can remove this piece of paper here and this piece of paper here. And that'll kind of avoid having to tear out those tiny little seam allowances after you sew. And then you just sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure your seam allowances are consistent. Make sure your fabric's lined up. If you're going to do it this way, you do want to make sure that, you know, when you trim, you're trimming accurately. When you sew, you're sewing accurately. Set yourself up for success. Let me turn my sewing machine on. Okay, and then I'll just sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I don't worry about like bias edges. If you sew this seam and you're getting like a lot of stretching, then you either need to stop pulling on the back side of your fabric. Like if it's going through and you're yanking back here, stop that. Or you might need to adjust your presser foot tension dial, this one here, so it pushes down on your fabric. You might need to adjust that a little bit. So either way, you shouldn't have a lot of puckering, even if you're working with stretchy bias edges there. And then this one presses nicely and neatly because I'm just going to press it towards that solid piece of fabric. So there's PA and PB. The next step is PC to PD. And so it's the exact same idea. Here's PC to PD. And oh, see, I love it when a solid piece of fabric matches up with one with seams in it. That's just so satisfying. And I will say as a note, if I'm doing a legit kit, I do not tear the paper off these tiny sections before I sew them. This is the exception. This is where I will tear my paper off because it's large pieces and there's not any like critical intersections and there's not, good morning iron, there's not a ton of information on the piece of paper. So I'm not talking about tearing paper off of these. I'm talking about just for this pattern, the and sew I, the large format foundation paper piecing. Now, I will maybe, if I'm working on a legit kit and I have a block like this with its very simple seams, I might go ahead and tear it off this as I'm sewing blocks together. That's a totally personal preference. So that's a matter for another day. But on something like this, I will probably tear my paper off. And then it just saves you a step later. You know, you don't have to tear paper off in the end. I'm just going to take it off as I go. But make sure you know what your pattern piece is. Make sure you know which way is right sides up. Make sure, you know, you have it right before you tear. Now see, yeah, no, I might leave this one on just because if I tear it off here, it takes all of the paper off this one. So it really just depends on the mood I'm in the day. I'll leave this one on so you can see the other way to do it. I'm really gonna sew right on that line. Okay. And now I will take the paper out of the seam allowance before pressing. Give it a good crease. If your paper doesn't tear easily, maybe you need to shorten your stitch length. Okay. And then again, I will press it towards the solid piece of fabric. I mean, you could press your seams open here But if I press this open, I'm pressing these intersections back on themselves, and they just lie so much nicer when you can press them towards the solid piece of fabric and not press them back on themselves. That's also a totally personal preference. Okay, and then I come to PE, and PF is the one I'm missing, and I just know it's in this mess somewhere. So I'll find it hopefully eventually. I'm gonna set that aside and go ahead and finish the bottom here, the piece PG through PL. I'll just do that real quick. So E and F get set aside, and someday I'll find them. And I will just work on PG through PH. Let's see. And then if I am going to tear a paper off and I need to keep this label, I mean, just pin that label right on there and take the paper off the seam allowances. Have you noticed how paper does have a grain? So when I'm ripping it this way, it wants to do its own thing. But if, oh, would you hush? Seriously. If I'm ripping it this way, it'll more easily go in the direction. So paper has a grain, which is why sometimes it's nicer to rip paper like, I think the vertical tears or the horizontal. I think the horizontal tears on a legit kit are more easy. They're easier than the vertical tears because that's with the grain of the paper, and it just makes it real nice and satisfying. Okay, see, and I probably should have left this one on there just so I remember for sure. Not even so much which piece this is, but which way is right side up. So I'm gonna put this right sides together. And I do backstitch a tiny bit right there at the beginning. And I'm going to chain stitch. I'm not even going to take this off the machine. I'm going to put the next piece right on. Okay, and a flip. Oh, so sorry about that. So sorry. Having a tipsy day, I see. Okay. Well, I should have, it's okay, it doesn't matter. So this one I probably will press open because I've got two seams over here and one seam over here. So we'll just press it open. There we go. Ah, isn't that pretty? So, and then this one, I'll press this one open too. And this is where starching really comes into play because you get really nice creases and your pressing really holds when that fabric is starched. Okay, and then we're going to do, I'm gonna add L on before I add that, do that final seam. Oh, good, I'm so glad I came to this one. Here, let's talk about fixing a mistake. So, it happens to the best of us. I am just shy. It's just within the seam allowance, so You know, if it was like a little bit farther, I would say, oh, it'll be fine. It'll be within the seam allowance. This one will not be within the seam allowance. This one will be within the main part. So yeah, I mean, I could cut a whole new piece, but I'm not going to do that. I have a scrap that I cut off of another section when I was trimming, and I'm just going to add this on here. Now I could add, you know, if I had a bigger piece, I might even come back here and add it from a little farther back, just if that seam is farther away from the edge. In this case, I think I'm just gonna do it right there. But you don't have to cut a whole new piece, just add a scrap on. You will never see this seam in the final cut because you've got so many other seams going on, you'll never notice it. See, my goal here is I did want the seam far enough away from that corner so that the seam allowance does not get caught in that corner. It's not a big deal, it just would be a pain. So there, now I'm covered. There we go. Okay, now I will add L. Let me just iron it real quick. There we go. Okay, now I will add L onto K. Trim this up a bit. Where's my good scissors? What are y'all doing over there? Okay. Now see here, I accidentally cut my pattern. I didn't cut my fabric, just my pattern. That's not a big deal. See, I'm just offsetting that dog ear there. And then this one I'll press open as well. Okay. And then I'll just do that final seam on the bottom. Here. This one was a tiny bit off. I could have solved that. I probably saw it coming and wasn't paying much attention to it because I'm not too worried about it. But see, this is actually one of the benefits of taking the paper off is you can use the stretch to your benefit. So if I had seen that and paid attention and cared, I could have stretched that top fabric just enough as I was sewing to just bring it down a little bit and match it up. But I'm really not worried about it. I think this is the bottom edge maybe even, and so I'm just not too worried about it. Let's give it a good press. And now this one I could press to the side with fewer seams, but I'll just go ahead and press it open. It's not gonna misbehave too much. There we go. Oh, my iron is kind of spitting things at me today. Okay, that's the bottom of P. So I know I'll find PF somewhere. I don't know where it is. I've gone through all my files. It's around. He'll turn up. I mean, if I have to, I'll cut new fabric for it. But remember, I have all of these cut already. So I don't know where that fabric could be or that section could be. He's hiding somewhere. So I think this is technically like supposed to be the week of section 4, session 4, but I think I was working on the stuff from session 3, but let's go ahead and call this session 4, because technically for session 4, what we're doing is working through sections T and, what's the other one? T and F. So sections T and F, I have mine cut, and I'll be working on those this week. F is nice because it's one piece, so that'll be really satisfying, like quick progress. T has more pieces. Let's see here. There you are. There it is. T has more pieces, but it's still not bad, so nobody panic. I'm hoping I'll find PF somewhere in here. So work on T and F, and what I'll do is I'm going to swap up the order, because last week was session 4 and that was supposed to be fixing mistakes. So we'll do this as session 4, which is basically sewing sections T and F, and then next week I will probably try and sneak in the fixing mistakes. I gave you one this week, that was a sneak peek. And then hopefully after that we'll be back on track. I will be traveling for pretty much all of the month of June. And I kind of scheduled it so that we have some break weeks, and then I'm gonna pre-record some things. So hopefully I can stay on schedule with that. In June, I will be in Pigeon Forge at the Mountain Quilt Fest. So I've got like 5 classes there. I'm really looking forward to that. That's my first year there. So we're doing these little travel cases. That's my first class. And this is my pattern. I've had it for a long time and I'm excited to be teaching it. And then I'm doing a quilt coat. Actually, I'm doing 2 quilt coat classes because one of them sold out. So they opened a second quilt coat class. And then I have a Golden Retriever foundation paper piecing class. That's my pattern as well. I'm super excited about that one. I have to get my sample quilts done. And then I feel like there's another class that maybe it's just 4 classes. It's 2 quilt coats, the Retriever, the travel case. I think that's it. And then the second week of June, I'm going to Chesaning, Michigan for a Legit Kits retreat there. So it's a choose your own kit retreat. So you can join me in Michigan. If you have a kit already and you've been afraid to start it, like the mermaid maybe, this is a really good chance to get together with people who are also working on legit kits, and we all I show you lots of problem solving and organizing and just really help you work through it. If you haven't done legit kits before, you can get a coupon code to get a kit discounted for the retreat, and so it's a great way to get started in legit kits. Third week is in Las Vegas for the first time. June is the year of first. Chesaning, Michigan, Pigeon Forge, Las Vegas. I haven't taught there before. I've been there before, but I haven't taught there before. So that one is still unannounced, but it will be with Sewcations by Sew Bestie. And then the 4th week in June, I will be in Cleveland at Imagine That and More, which Cleveland holds an interesting background for me. So I'm excited to be back. The last 2 times I went to Cleveland, I had to both times leave early. So I'm hoping this time I can actually enjoy the city. But that is at Imagine That and More, and that's a trunk show Wednesday evening, and then we'll do a 2-day Legit Kits Choose Your Own Kit class. And then right after June is done, my crazy month, I still don't know what I did. I think I was just like looking at the calendar and seeing, oh no, I'm available this week, and not realizing I had things every other week. Right after June, we leave for Hawaii. So I'm teaching at Quilt Passions in Hawaii. Again, we're doing like a Legit Kits class. We're doing a woven fabric basket class. That one's been a huge hit. So several classes in Hawaii, and then we'll do the same classes in Mission Viejo, California at their second store, the Quilt Passions store in California. So Thank you for your support and your messages. And I'm not going to get sappy because nobody wants to see me cry this morning, but thank you. And happy sewing. Make good progress. I love seeing your photos in the Facebook group and on social media. And a couple of you have messaged me directly and I love seeing it. So I'm very excited. I am realizing that now that I'm in this new space, I'm inside now. I'm no longer in the garage, but the one thing I'm missing is a design wall. I kind of had one in the garage, but it wasn't even a good one. So I need to figure that out in here. I'm almost thinking, I was thinking the other day, like maybe a Roman blind, like I can draw it up to the ceiling when I'm not using it and then pull it down. But I don't want to block off my natural sunlight, so I need to think carefully about where to put it. There's just not a perfect place for it, so I need to think about that. Originally, we had talked about actually building a wall to give myself privacy. But I think at this point, we're not going to do a wall anymore. We kind of like the space open. I like being able to say hi to my family when they're in the kitchen because I'm right here off the kitchen. So I like being open to everyone, but I am losing wall space because of that, because that would have given me two big walls to work with. So it's okay as a trade-off, but I do need to figure out a design wall. So we'll see what happens. All right, thanks guys. I will see you very soon and hopefully we'll be on schedule from here on. Bye.